All right, let's just see if I can advance everything as it should do. Oh, I have a technical glitch. My picture has disappeared. Let's try that again. Okay, so I'm an anatomical pathologist and I'm zooming in from my office. This is my microscope here. So what do? We examine tissue biopsies that have been taken by surgeons and examine them both macroscopically and with the microscope. And I'm zooming in here today from the Lab Plus building, level 2. My office is about here, and I have a view of the helipad over there. I make diagnoses on microscopic images, and a common question asked is it cancer? And if it is cancer, what sort is it? So that's the realm of anatomical pathology. I also do some teaching with the clinical medical students in their clinical years. And this is a description of the MBCHB 501 clinical lab visit project, where they get 2 hours, and we get them when they're a 5th year medical student, but in 18 months time, they're going to be a house officer. And they come to the laboratory and they come to learn about lab tests and error and how their role as a house officer can mitigate error in lab tests. So that is the focus of the lesson. And we divide error into pre-analytical, before specimens get to the laboratory, and within the laboratory, and post-analytical. The structure of the lesson is small group learning. There's 5 to 6 students come in a group, and we follow a specimen, not a patient, a specimen, from the request, writing a request form, to the test that happens in the laboratory, which for us is a piece of tissue, look under the microscope, make a diagnosis, generate a report, and then the student has to contextualize the findings of the report, say breast cancer, in the context of the patient, and consider the resource implication of these tests that they are requesting. So the first problem I had was a diversity of student base. They range from clueless to keeners, and this was difficult to get a baseline to get everybody moving together. And the second problem I had was we were allowed 2 hours. So I designed a fabulous program of interactive dissection, microscopy, clinical discussion, problem solving, small group work, so that we could exercise higher order thinking skills, you know, analysis and evaluation, that sort of thing. But what really happened? I found I was spending most of my time explaining basic concepts and definitions, lower order thinking skills, and that shrunk the time available for the hands-on interactive activities that I had designed in the laboratory, which is the whole purpose of them actually coming to the laboratory rather than listening to a lecture. So I did a lesson redesign. So you'll be familiar with blooms here on the left, and I wanted to put the lower order blooms, remember and understand, into a pre-work online e-lesson. So I'd do all of the lower order thinking skills pre-work, and then when they came to the laboratory, we would do the higher order thinking skills with the hands-on and the interaction. And of course, you'll know Miller's clinical competency pyramid as well. So the nose, the blue part, would also be dealt with in the online pre-work lesson. And this is what it looks like, the lesson design. So I'd have 20 minutes, a duration lesson where they would do it online. And then they'd come to the laboratory and we'd have 100 minutes in the laboratory where we'd do the hands-on dissection, microscopy, you know, doing stuff and discuss higher order thinking skills, collaboration, clinical skills training. And then the last part of the course is the assignment where they integrate everything that they have learnt from lower order to higher order thinking skills and create a document with a review of the literature. So that was the lesson redesign. So I thought, great. This was also informed by the literature. My colleague, Professor Diane Kenwright from University of Otago, has done flipped blended pathology learning, and I've taken a lot of tips from her problems and pitfalls to design this way of delivering the lesson. But In 2018, when I started, I used a software called Smart Sparrow, and I found some problems. But when I looked into the literature, I was not alone. And I think probably I'm not alone if I look at my cohort of teachers, and you're all teachers. Jan is going to put up a Zoom poll, and there is just one question, and you can click multiple answers. What are your barriers? Or if you don't not interested, or if you're not designing e-lessons, what have you observed in others? How many participants have we got, Jan? And then when we have...
We've got 33 out of 43.
Okay.
It's still rolling in.
Still rolling in. When we slow down to a stop, then we'll press the button so we can all see the answers, and I'm really interested to see the answers too.
Okay, 10 seconds. 10 more seconds.
Thanks, Jan. Actually, I'm going to put in one as well, because I had a couple of these problems.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
I'll end it now.
Show us the answer.
Share results.
Oh, cool. Right. Well, isn't that interesting? So, most people have lack of time. Yeah, who's got extra time in the day? But you can see, it's interesting, isn't it? There's a range of barriers and problems, and these are the 4 key areas that were identified by Doherty in a review in 2018. Interesting spread. So I'm going to close that and move on. And I want to, when I did this comparison, I wanted to look into these 4 areas. And because I was having problems, I looked to a higher authority. So this is Professor David Cook, Professor of Medical Education at the Mayo Clinic. I figure he should know a few things. He said, we don't need to clarify how and when to use e-learning. I'd already figured this out, it was going to be good. But we do need to clarify through e-learning field tests comparing one e-learning intervention to another. So if he says we need to do comparisons, I reckon he's got a point. So that's what I set upon doing during the next 3 years. Comparison frameworks, got to have a framework. First of all, these were the 4 barrier areas identified by Doherty. Particularly the skills and resources were my personal problems. I didn't have the skills, I had a skills deficit and a time deficit. I had a good attitude. I knew I could do it with support, and institutions supported me too by getting the Smart Sparrow trial license. So they were good. Then I'm going to integrate just these 2. If we look at the sections model of technology evaluation, there are all of these elements here. I'm only going to focus on ease of use, cost and time, which map to the areas of barrier. But you know, e-learning has got good things about it as well. If we look at this interaction facet, opportunities with e-learning tools as enumerated by Marcus, including adaptive feedback, branch scenarios, and learner analytics, which are an affordance greater than we can get face-to-face. So I looked at these factors as well in my comparison. And of course, multiple perspectives. So student perspective, teacher's perspective, okay, it was just me, it was a pilot program, and it was to inform my own selection really, and an institution perspective, some aspects that would be of interest. How did I do it? So I developed the same lesson in different software every year. So Smart Sparrow was the first year, Kura Cloud, and this year I did H5P. And what did the lesson look like? So here is a video run through just little snips from Kura Cloud. I have 12 pages. There is a menu where the students can go backwards and forwards. I've got an open text box question there. There is a video that they can watch with prompted questions that extract information that I want them to get out of this video, which shows them a technique that's happening in the laboratory called frozen section, cutting and making a slide and then staining the slide. And then we review the information with a knowledge check. This is learning objective number 2. I've made a video to explain the definitions and the concepts here. And then we do an interactive quiz. It's a drag and drop activity to reinforce their learning from the video and the terminology. And then a multi-choice type of question. And they can do a knowledge check and get the correct or incorrect answer feedback. This is a supportive information, and then an introduction to what's going to happen in the clinical laboratory, and there's an exit survey of 6 questions. Okay, so that was a run through, and the Kura Cloud, that was quite easy to author in. And this year I did H5P, and you can see the landing page looks very similar, and I've got an open text box question. I've got links to resources outside. They have to read this JAMA frozen section article. It's actually a patient information leaflet. They play the video. They answer the questions from information that is conveyed in the video, with the question promptings there, with open text box questions. The same learning objective, the same video has been put in. So you can see there's certain similarities. Here I've had a slightly different type of quiz, but the questions were the same, yes and no, and there is adaptive feedback with the answer, whether it's correct or incorrect. That's the multi-choice. They can redo the question if they get it wrong till they get it right, and then there's the explanation of the answer with the right question. Here's the supportive documentation, what's going to happen in the laboratory, and for the exit survey, I linked out to a Qualtrics survey, which I prefer now. So that was an overview of the lesson that has been replicated in different e-learning software, and you can see it looks kind of similar, but it's not about us. What did the students think? So there was an exit survey at the end. Let's have a look at the student cohort. So I just started out small, just with a little groups, and it kind of grew. So this is small group learning. 2018, I had 2 groups. 2019, I had 2 groups. And in 2020, something happened and I had 8 groups. So who knows what happens in 2020? Well, because of level 4 lockdown, this all happened in semester 1, I converted my laboratory visit to a virtual laboratory visit because I was able to, and it was very easy to deploy that pre-work e-lesson. But that's the topic for another talk. That's not about today. How long did it take the students to complete the lesson? So around 20 minutes, which was what I expected. So I was pleased that I anticipated that. And then I asked them to rate the level of complexity. And here is the speed dial. And you can see most of the students in most of the learning platforms rated it as just to the easy side of just right. And that's exactly where I wanted it to be, because I wanted the students to have a feeling of success completing the lesson. Rate the technical ease of use. All of them were easy for the students. And did they learn anything? This, of course, is their own self-perception. And it seems to be they perceived that they learned something probably to the same degree. And when they came to the physical lab, either Zoom or physical, at the end of that face-to-face session, I asked them again for reflections on the online lesson before the physical lesson. So I'm asking them about the flipped blended model. This was an anonymous survey, and these were some of the quotes that I extracted from their responses. So in summary, what did the students think of these three different e-learning platforms? They thought they were all good, they liked them, and they often commented they wanted longer lesson and they wanted more questions. So there was no difference. They couldn't tell the difference. Okay, what about the teacher perspective? So you're all teachers in this virtual room here. I'm kind of being the proxy for all of us. How did I find this? I extracted these 3 questions you can see on the left side to evaluate against each other. This is my subjective experience. although the first one is objective. How long did it take me to create the lesson and insert it into Canvas? Smart Sparrow took me 16 hours to create a 20-minute lesson. It included, I went to the Smart Sparrow headquarters in Sydney twice when I was in Sydney on business for other things, several video conference calls and lots of email follow-up. Kura Cloud, I made the same lesson in 3 hours. I didn't need any vendor support. I just looked at the help page and was able to solve my own problems. And this year, it took me 5 hours to learn the software and make the first program lesson in H5P. And then I made a second lesson using my first lesson as a template. It took me 20 minutes. How hard was it? Smart Sparrow was complex. It was complex software. And in 2019, Kura Cloud, it was simple software. And H5P is on the simple side as well. And how easy was it for me to use both authoring and Canvas integration? So Smart Sparrow was hard, and Kura Cloud was easy, and H5P was on the easy side as well. Learner analytics. So we're still on the teacher perspective here. One of the reasons I wanted to try Smart Sparrow was the sophisticated learner analytics. And as an example, I can see how long a learner spends on each page, because they only spent 3 seconds on one of my learning objective pages. I modified my lesson to include a question to make it active. And I can also see the journey trace as a Sankey diagram and the number of attempts that they make at each question. By comparison, Kura Cloud and H5P are much more limited. By adaptivity, I mean individualization of learner progression through the lesson. In Smart Sparrow, I could program in pathways. So if the student answered incorrectly, the first attempt, they get a hint. The second attempt, they get a detailed clue. And the third attempt, I could send them to an explanatory video. These are called trap states. It's ideal for branching scenarios. Kura Cloud and H5P were limited to displaying the same answers to questions, although there is an app for branching scenarios in H5P. Smart Sparrow is also had the advantage of having a licensed medical image library. So there was radiology, pathology, diagrams, biomedical images of all sorts that I could just extract from the library and put into my lesson. The other two do not, most of them don't. So what do I think? And what do you think? There are big differences, some good stuff and some more difficult stuff. I'll bring this together at the end of my talk, but next we should look at the institution perspective. How much does it cost? A range of costs there. How much vendor support and author training is needing? So Smart Sparrow, we'd need quite a lot of support. Kura Cloud, not so much. And H5P, probably a little bit more than Kura Cloud. And this is an interesting one, software ownership. So Smart Sparrow was sold to Pearson Publishing in January 2020. So my lesson has now disappeared. Kura Cloud is a proprietary software, and H5P has 2 models. One's open source, and which is free, and the .com is licensed, but it's also developed open source. So which one should you choose? Well, it depends, doesn't it? So it's like a mix, like biological systems is a mix of DNA of the software and the environment that we work on. So I'm going to use an analogy of graphic software to explain. So Smart Sparrow is like Photoshop. It's got sophisticated analytics and adaptivity and a stock image library, but it's complex and time consuming. I think it's best for completely online course to help learning design. With the help of a learning designer, you could create a personalized adaptive learning experience, which is not possible in H5P and Kura Cloud. Kura Cloud, in contrast, is quick and easy to use, like PowerPoint. It's got limited adaptivity and analytics. I think it's best for blended, where you do the higher order thinking skills in the face-to-face session. And H5P is a bit of a blend. It's relatively easy to use, but it's got a large suite of interactive apps. So it's got a bit of PowerPoint in there as well. So I can make lessons myself in H5P and CuraCloud, but I would need support to make lessons in Smart Sparrow. Almost there. What did I learn? There is no need for complex branching scenarios in Blended. Keep a copy of the lesson in all your assets, independent of the authoring tool, so you can just take it like a suitcase and blend it into the next lesson as required. Using existing lesson templates and swapping out the content is a very efficient way to get new learners into making e-learning programs. You just build on what somebody else has done instead of making it from scratch. And a community of users is always going to be good. And what worked? Flipped Blended worked for me and the students. Lots for the online lessons, higher order for the face-to-face. H5P and CuraCloud were easy enough to use. I liked the Qualtrics evaluation software, which I'm now built into all of my lessons. I have 100% response rate because I built it in. And what else worked? Zoom worked, and co-teaching with 2 tutors was a definite advantage. And I'd like to say thanks to these people from Auckland University for helping me trial these various licenses and support. And there we go, ready for questions.